Caverloft Plantation, Ocréchatte, Louisiana, November 9th, 1928, 11:39 p.m. Everyone had known of the dogma. It was practically a legend amongst the Order of the Ninth Scorpion, the Dogma Volscht, commonly referred to as the Void War. Before the cosmic devastation that engulfed it, Ysh'Atarians was an ancient world of towering spires and sprawling deserts. Ysh'Atarians was known as the Endless Barrens, or the Frozen Desert Lost Time. Home to the lithe and elegant Craven Ysh'Atar, or Children of Royalty, Ysh'Atarians was a place of beauty, shining gold on silent ember-glown evenings. Krelig was another matter entirely. Krelig, known also by its less attractive title of the Swamplands, was a toxic sludge pit, crawling and slithering with different abominations of varying proportions. Abominations like the Kyrell and Exquox. Worst of all were the Dogma Ysh'Atar, the Children of War, the mutated, hulking tossaways of the Craven Ysh'Atar. Both factions were said to be descended from the Great Old Ones, the nephews of Yog-Sothoth, the cousins of Great Cthulhu. Both worlds are said to reside on the far edge of a mysterious realm known in ancient texts as the Dreamlands, but this theory is contentious at best. There was also talk of another realm, a dimension known as the Abysm. The bottom layer of the Citadels of Chaos, the Abysm was home to the worst entities known to the universe: the Nine Who Walk, the Umbral Consciousness, the Faceless Lords, Dahlon, and the Shadow Mother. All reside imprisoned within the Abysm, as told in the accursed pages of the Necronomicon. The Abysm was the Ysh'Atarian equivalent of Hell, and the Order of the Ninth Scorpion wanted to open the gates of Hell. Quentin Caverloft stood in front of his full-body mirror, muttering to himself, his crimson robes fluttering in the soft breeze, let in by the open balcony doors. "Tonight will be the night," he thought. "Tonight, we will open the way, and nothing will stop us." 11:54 p.m. "Lord Caverloft," Harry de Moy addressed the High Priest of the Order of the Ninth Scorpion, "everything has been prepared. The sacrifice is ready. Shall we proceed?" Caverloft nodded, raising the hood of his robe over his head, his long white beard being the only discernible feature. Both men descended down the stairs toward the sub-level basement, where the ceremony was being held. Once both de Moy and Caverloft had entered the basement, the door was closed behind them and firmly locked. The place they had entered could hardly be called a basement. The word cathedral would be more appropriate. The chamber was circular, and the dim lighting provided by candles gave the room a more sinister air. In the very center stood a statue of something. It resembled a man with insectile appendages on its torso. Its head was that of an ungodly cephalopod caricature. Its arms were great crab-like pincers. Below the heathen idol sat a stonework dais. Atop that lay an unconscious man. Well up to 100 men and women resided in the chamber, all dressed in scarlet robes and masks of dirty cloth. A man stood by the dais, holding a ceremonial dagger, stained and rusted with years of blood. The unconscious man stirred, groaning at the pain in the back of his head. His eyes fluttered open. 11:58 p.m. Caverloft took his place before the raised dais and outstretched his arms. "We are gathered here today to herald our masters into this plane of existence. From the blood of this mortal shall the Abysm be opened, and our masters will walk this world as they once did. We will be heralded as the saviors of the Dark Ones, the ninth Scorpion will rise. The cultists cheered at Caverloft's words. The man bound to the altar struggled, to no avail. Caverloft began chanting in some strange language, as the man beside him began to slowly raise the blood-stained dagger. The rest of the cult began to chant as well. As Caverloft's words reached their fever pitch, the rest of the cult began to shout, and some of them began to dance. The candles flickered as the cultists danced wildly, and Caverloft shouted in tongues. The bound man screamed through the cloth covering his mouth as the dagger plunged downwards, silencing his fearful wails. 12 a.m. The candles blew out as the screaming stopped. The chanting had ended, and everyone had also ended their insane dancing. Everything had gone quiet and dark. The only sound that could be heard was the breathing of Caverloft, winded from shouting his cacodemoniacal sermons. The darkness was impenetrable, and the silence unbroken. Have we done it? Caverloft wondered to himself. Suddenly, from the altar, shone a golden light. The glow seemed to be emanating from the blood of the sacrifice. The light grew brighter as Caverloft watched, wide-eyed. Ethereal wisps of radiant shine stretched out from the altar. They touched the unlit candles, and flames burst on the wicks. Caverloft made an attempt to touch the light, but the tendrils suddenly withdrew and whipped around like angry snakes, striking at those unlucky enough to be close to the altar. Several people were slammed against the walls as the golden wisps flew around the chamber, pushing cultists into different directions. Harry DeMoy snatched up a bucket of water and raced toward the altar. Before the tendrils could catch him, DeMoy upended the bucket atop the glowing blood. The water washed away the gore, and the golden glow faded. Along with it, the golden tendrils. Caverloft stood up, panting. The candlelight made every shadow dance and flicker. "Harry!" he shouted. DeMoy came striding over. "What was that?" DeMoy asked, flustered. A look that had never been on Caverloft's face before had now appeared. That look was one of fear and uncertainty. I don't know," he said in a hoarse whisper. "You don't suppose it was one of them, do you?" Caverloft knew what DeMoy was referring to. The golden glow, the ethereal tentacles. But no, it couldn't be. That was a myth. There was no such thing as a pale physician. It couldn't be true. Could it? He wasn't sure. The pale physicians were said to be a caste of Ysh'Atarians descended from the Pallid Father, a mysterious figure who, according to legend, had grown weary of the war effort and created a race of creatures that would lead both sides of the Void War into blissful mollification. Caverloft's fears were interrupted by a scream. The scream was coming from one of the cultists, except said cultist was levitating high above the rest of the Order of the Ninth Scorpion. DeMoy recognized the cultist. It was Jeffrey Beavers. Jeffrey flailed around, wailing and crying. "What's happening?" Caverloft shouted. "Help me!" Jeffrey shouted before his head snapped to the left and his screams turned to tortured gurgles. Jeffrey's body dropped to the floor with a sickening crunch. Inside the chamber, there was nothing but panic. Cultists flew in different directions. One was thrust up and slammed against the ceiling, while another was mashed into the floor by the unseen abomination. The invisible force slaughtered everything in sight. "Lord Caverloft!" Harry DeMoy shouted past the screams of terror. Caverloft tried to open the locked door, but to no avail. "There's a key beside the—" DeMoy did not finish, as he was snatched up from the ground and held high in the air. Caverloft stood helpless as DeMoy screamed. Caverloft gasped when DeMoy's head caved in on itself. Blood erupted as Demoy's body fell to the floor, his skull a pulpy ruin. Kaverloft watched in horror as the cult were eviscerated and piled haphazardly into different piles. The high priest ran around the room like a headless chicken until something fell on top of him, and the world went dark. Kaverloft Plantation, Ocréchatte, Louisiana, November 10th, 1928, 2:07 a.m. Quentin Kaverloft awoke in darkness. The smell was utterly atrocious, a mix of iron and feces. He tried to cover his face, but realized he couldn't move. He began to panic. Was he buried alive? He tried to move again, with more success this time. He pushed several bodies and dismembered limbs off of his person. He stood up, shaking. He had never seen such slaughter. He gazed around the chamber, observing all the mangled corpses littering the floor. He couldn't believe it. What had they done? He stumbled toward the door, still locked. He had to find the key. He staggered towards the altar. "This wasn't what I intended," Kaverloft thought as he stumbled over the various cadavers lying about the chamber. He wasn't sure what to do after he got out. "I'll run. I'll pack my things, and I'll go. I need to get away," Kaverloft feverishly muttered to himself. That was when he heard the stomping. He spun around. He looked at the floor. In the gathered blood, he could see footprints. Inhuman, large footprints. He noticed that the prints were being left by feet with only 3 toes. Toes that ended in claws. And whatever was making them was coming closer. Kaverloft tried to run, but was snatched up into the air by unseen hands. He sat dangling above the ground, flailing his arms and legs. He felt the invisible claws stab into his torso. The pain was unbearable, and he cried and flailed his arms. He heard a low growling. He whipped his head toward the sound. What he saw was the golden glow of 2 enormous eyes. And in those eyes, Kaverloft saw all the burning hatred of 1,000 dying worlds on fire, an endless void of chaotic malevolence that knew no concept of mercy. It was in those eyes, Kaverloft realized, that the legends were all true.
Heavens to my whims. I will bathe this world in fire and blood.
The monster threw Kaverloft to the ground with a sickening thump. The dying man turned his head towards the altar and saw a shining portal unfurl in the center of the dais. In the moments that followed, hundreds of creatures and beasts emerged from the gate. Some were small rodent-like creatures that appeared to giggle incessantly. Others were dark shadow figures that moved like lightning. Even more still were the thousands of creatures that continued to pour out of the portal like blood from a wound. Kaverloft turned his head to face the monster once again, only to be met by the swiftly encroaching sleep of the aeons. Hello everyone, and thank you once again for tuning in to Freaky Feline Productions. This has been The Summoning, written and performed by Dean M. Corsian, with music by Miu and Kevin MacLeod at Incomptech.com. I hope you all enjoyed today's new little narration. Well, not new, it's technically old, but it has been refurbished. To show that you liked it, be sure to leave a like and comment what your favorite moment was, or what you liked about it. Be sure to share this video, and subscribe to Freaky Feline Productions. As always, I look forward to seeing you in the next post, but until then, stay safe out there and have a good day.